What does money reveal about you? Today, we're going to be using astrology as an amazing tool to show us, to mirror to us, what money is replacing in our lives, where we have misplaced authority into money rather than in ourselves. This video will not be teaching you how to manifest money or moralizing money, making it right, wrong, bad, good, but instead using it as a mirror to reflect back to you the woundings that are happening inside of you emotionally. Our relationship to money is not dependent on whether or not we have it or not. This is a very common misconception in the world because money is so charged, right? But in fact, money itself is neutral. It's the emotional charge that we give it personally and collectively that is what creates that charge for us, that makes us feel like it can save us from all of our problems, but that's just not correct. And a lot of times we believe that it's the lack of money that brings problems our way, that keeps us stuck, right? If we had more money, we'd have this. But I want to make sure that we discuss today that having money is also a way that keeps a lot of people stuck. And there's so many ways that we can see those scenarios happening. And I see it all the time in the work that I do and in my own life. Right? Having money, doing money, or making money doing something in one way can keep us kind of stuck there as well. So having it, not having it, regardless, we can still be projecting a lot of our own internal woundings onto money. So that's what we're going to examine today. And astrology is a amazing amazing tool to use to study this further. Now, when we think about money in astrology, we generally think of it as the earth signs and the earth houses, because the earth is the material world and money is a way of valuing something that is very material. So I will agree with this. And today we're going to look at the houses. So the earth houses are the second house, the sixth house, and the 10th house. And I've just used my own chart for reference here. So as we can see, these houses fall in earth signs for me as well, but for you, they may not fall in earth signs depending on what your rising sign is. However, regardless, these are earth houses traditionally. The second house is about self-worth, value, resources, income, amongst other things, but let's just keep it related to money here. The sixth house is how we offer service to the world. It's also illness through the body. It's what we are willing to work really hard for. This is the house of strife. And then the 10th house is career, legacy, achievements, goals. If you took my Mapping the Shadows workshop, you know about these houses already, and you also know that opposing them are water houses. And in this scenario, we're going to see how money is actually emotionally charged dependent on the water house that it touches. And so for each of us, this may be bringing up different aspects, different woundings, but it gives us a place to look. It gives us more information than we would have if we didn't have the astrology chart to look at, right? Which is why we can use astrology to see what it exposes about our relationship with money. So for example, when we look at money through the lens of the second house is about income, acquisition, values, self-worth, yes. The opposite house, which by the way, if you're familiar with my work, you know that I often talk about how when we look at signs and houses, we don't need to should do anything, but I like to look at the opposite because it's difficult to understand something without understanding its opposite. So then we look at the eighth house. The eighth house is about shared emotions, emotional control, emotional enmeshment, the give and take in relationships, shared income, right? The second house is your income. The eighth house is shared income. This is a house that is ruled naturally by Scorpio. So there is a depth to it, intimacy, psychology, all these things. There's a lot of things associated with the eighth house. However, when it comes to money, if we are trying to replace or gain a lot of money, acquire a ton of money, and associate it to a sense of self-worth, we are actually trying to over-regulate emotional fear, control, or power dynamics in our lives. So yes, on the surface, it may look like, yeah, sure, absolutely, money is tied to self-worth and value, but beneath that, there is a fear of, there's fear of loss of control, of not having enough power in relational situations without money. Fear that we will lose control if we do not have enough money. So in that way, we start outsourcing our self-worth and our self-value to money, yes, but also our sense of emotional control. Then we look to the sixth house. And when I think about money in regards to the sixth house, I think about it from the perspective that the sixth house is about service, responsibility, productivity, right? This is naturally the house of Virgo. And opposite this house is the 12th house: spirituality, grief, closure, meditation, solitude. And so what ends up happening here is this is where we overwork ourselves, give too much, have too much responsibility, take responsibility for everybody in our lives, give too much service, constantly want to give service, because what we're really trying to look at here, or what we're trying to avoid or replace, is a sense of grief, abandonment by the universe, sense of spiritual disconnection, not recognizing that we are all one. And so we don't need, when you overgive, you are actually taking away from the world, because you are abandoning yourself and you are part of this universe, this beautiful universe. So when you're overworking, overserving, you're trying to account for unprocessed spiritual loss or guilt or grief that will never, ever, ever be, will never be resolved through acquiring money or charging less for your services or giving and giving and giving. And then when we look at the 10th house here, we see that this is visibility, authority, status. And beneath it, or opposing it, is the 4th house, the house of safety, home, belonging on a very deep level, emotional belonging. So what we often do is we can use money as a place of signaling authority, because there is a disconnect of true emotional belonging anywhere in the world. Not feeling like you can belong without visibility or authority through money and what that money brings you, what a sense of achievement that it brings you, right? That'll then, if I achieve, then I'll finally belong somewhere. People will see my authority. So you're really misplacing a sense of natural authority with money and status. So what ends up happening here is that we're chasing success, right? Trying to compensate for not feeling held or rooted in something real emotionally. And in all of these, we can kind of see where people can get stuck, right? Stuck in acquisition, stuck in overgiving, stuck in status and authority and visibility, and how they're actually pointing to something much deeper within. And the step becomes then, how do we begin to resolve and really look at these emotional patterns underneath money? As I mentioned before, sometimes when we get money, we can actually remove a lot of constraints. And when we remove constraints, deeper things come up, right? As I said, I'm not going to go super into my own money stories, but I really am passionate about talking about money, because money keeps a lot of people stuck from offering very, very valuable services to the world. If you don't have enough of it, that becomes a way of avoiding responsibility. If you have enough of it, it may keep you stuck offering a service that you no longer want to offer, but feel like you're kind of stuck with. So I'm passionate about talking about this, because if we can start working with the wounds under money, it can help us move into a more natural way of serving the world, a more generous way of serving the world. And this is what we need right now more than anything. When I was a pharmacist, for years, about 3 years, before I quit my job as a pharmacist, I started doing some deep work around healing my money stories, my money wounds. And eventually, that was a very necessary part of me being able to leave pharmacy. It was a very necessary part of building the foundations of being able to leave my career, a stable career as a pharmacist, to pursue the unknown, was looking at the wounding beneath these money stories and beginning the process of working with them, right? This is always a process. That's why so much of my work is about learning to love the process, because you never get to a point where your money story is fixed, where your relationship to money is fixed, where you are fixed. It's never about fixing, it's about learning to love the process. So if you resonate with this type of work and moving away from trying to fix ourselves, but rather seeing ourselves and our stories and our lives as a process that's unfolding, then you're really going to like this channel here, and you're going to love working deeper with me in my one-on-ones and my group programs, my workshops, because that's when I show you how to really start doing that. I can work closer with you on how to do that. And right now, I've got my Inner Revolution Immersion group program open, but make sure you always check the description box and see what my offerings are to see how I can be of service to you. And but with Inner Revolution Immersion, it's really for those people who are going through a state of transition, who are maybe burnt out, or knowing that something new, a new identity is trying to emerge, but they're unsure on how to step into that and how to get more clear about the process of uncertainty and how we can move through it with more ease. And we can use human design and astrology to help guide us in that process, to the places to look for in our charts that really help us connect to something that's more important to us, that's deeper, our dharma, our purpose. So make sure you check that out if you're interested. I'd love to hear what came up for you as I was talking about these stories about the second house, the sixth house, the 10th house. Which of these roots do you feel like has the biggest grip on you? You know, I find that a lot of spiritual entrepreneurs, especially, I'll just say this, do get kind of stuck on this axis, because the 12th house is a house of spirituality and spiritual connection, naturally ruled by Pisces. And what ends up happening is we give over service, because there's a responsibility or a feeling of like, because generally spiritual people tend to be very sensitive, there is a feeling of all the pain in the world, and just wanting to freely rid people of their pain. But then it can go a little bit deeper than that, right? Like I'm not originally from Iran, and whenever I visit places like Mexico or Iran or India or Morocco, I'm reminded about this axis a lot, right? Where so many of us project a lot of our own disconnection spiritually onto other people, because their financial situations are so different, right? And my motto with life is, you know, whenever I tell people I go to India, like people I don't really know, they'll be like, why would you go to India? It's just full of pain and suffering. And my one of my biggest mottos in life is to not look away from, sure, there might be pain and suffering, but you know, why would I look away from that? And not in a masochistic way, which can also happen. This is actually one of the things that keeps us stuck in this axis of like, I must suffer too because there are people suffering. But rather, understanding the relationship that we have to suffering in ourselves and other people, how much we project suffering onto people simply because we see them living life a certain way. That can help us learn a lot about ourselves too, and our lack of connection to the spiritual world. Believing that there is something greater holding us, right? We tend to really look at the external world, the material world, and make a lot of judgments about the internal world of people when we see that. And we simply just do not know. So whether you're looking at somebody who has a lot of money or someone who does not have a lot of money or someone who lives a certain way versus living another way, you have no idea what their second house values are. and how their emotional world and their relational world is really being held, what they feel rooted in, even if they don't have a sense of authority the way that society tells them that they should. And when we start unpacking it in ourselves and unpacking the projections in which this money is reflecting something to us, it's being a mirror to not just ourselves, but to other people. And through that, being able to see ourselves, we really start getting to the core of a lot of our own wounds. And when we start looking at the core of our own wounds, and start taking responsibility for them, true radical responsibility for them, life begins to really unfold in a beautiful way. Thank you so much for sitting with me today. I hope that you have learned how to use astrology as a tool and learned a little bit more about yourself. Once again, make sure you check out my offerings in the description box down below and let me know which one of these pairs of houses resonates most with you right now. I'll see you next time.